Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today, I have an assortment of subscriber-submitted experiences. I also am going to finish off the Reptilian case files with Reptilian case file number 34. Before we get into all that, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below, merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. Folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we? Today's first experience. Hey Jeff, I'd like to share what happened to me mid-April of 2015. It was the end of the afternoon and the light was fairly decent. I decided to take a little hike in the Hira Mountain Forest, East France, where we live. I was with a friend and my little dog. We chose a place where I parked my car and we began to walk in. It didn't take long before I began to feel nervous. As we are walking, we heard this terrible noise. It sounded like doves, but they weren't singing, they were screaming. It was the first time I had ever heard this noise. I laughed and said to my friend, I feel like they don't want us in the forest for some reason. We pushed on and the path was wide as we got further along. Suddenly I noticed something moving down the trail to the side of us. I realized that it was an animal and I thought possibly a large dog. It was black. I was upset and told my friend that I would rather go back to the car. I didn't want my little dog to cross paths with what I thought was a large dog off its leash. Luckily, my little dog was on the leash. I started to turn around and return to the car, but my friend stayed to watch and see if she could place this rogue dog without its owner. I was walking for a couple of minutes when I heard my friend screaming, "Run, run!" Without looking back, I accelerated my pace and arrived at the car out of breath. I put my little dog into the car before I got into the car. I looked down the path and I saw this deep black-colored creature walking into the forest away from us. I was so surprised and shocked I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I could only see the top up to the shoulders of this creature. My friend who joined me at the car explained to me what she had seen. She said that this creature moved by kind of slipping at a high speed along the side, then seemed to get its momentum straighten up onto its hind legs. My friend then told me, and I can confirm this, that the creature was over 2 meters tall. We didn't see its eyes. The creature stopped when it saw my friend. They looked at each other for a couple of seconds, then the creature decided to turn back into the woods. My friend told me that it had a dog's-like head. Its ears looked to be pinned down. The creature had a muscular body, torso, and thighs that were covered with a deep black fur. We were shocked. We later decided to go back to the forest and see if there was an explanation to all of this. We didn't notice anything strange that could answer this puzzle. And then I told my friend we should try and get back to the place before nightfall. So we did, a couple of weeks later. It's strange, you see, because when we got out of the car on that evening visit, we immediately felt like something was wrong. The atmosphere was different. There was complete silence. We began to walk, and after a couple of minutes, I felt anxious again. I decided to go back, and my friend tried to push on into the trees, but she also came running back. This creature was there again. It was standing in the woods, staring directly at us. Thankfully, I hadn't seen the creature this time. We would like to be courageous enough to get a photo of it. I know we aren't the only ones to have seen this Dogman, and that's what we know it was. We learned that someone else saw it as well a few days later. So I tell my friends to be careful if they decide to go into any forest, especially if the forest is abnormally silent. This is not the first time that I've had a strange meeting in the forest. The first dates back to 5 or 6 years previously. I had never heard the name Dogman until a year ago. I must tell you that I've always loved nature, fields, and forests since I was a child. I always went to the woods a lot, but that year, while I was going to fetch mushrooms, I felt uncomfortable without understanding why. Several times I went back to the car, I regained my senses, then found myself confused, and then I understood what was bothering me. It was the abnormal, total silence in the middle of the summer. One morning I arrived early to get to the trail, and I saw this black mass at the end. I thought it was a tree stump. I continued to search for my mushrooms and gradually moved closer and closer to this tree stump. When I looked up, my heart sank so far I felt like I could hear it outside of my chest. I didn't understand what was in front of me, what I was seeing with my own eyes. Imagine a human being squatted with their head on their chest sleeping, but it was not a human. It was covered in black fur everywhere. It was not a boar nor a badger. I didn't understand what it was, and especially as I had never felt such a feeling of panic in my life. I started backing up, praying that this creature would not wake up, and I ran away without turning around. I have never been able to return to the forest after I made the observation of the creature I saw and just shared. In the meantime, I had learned about dogmen, that people are seeing them, and that they are possibly dangerous. In April, I was with my friend. My friend is a medium and can see and experience the dead. So I think there is a connection. Since I have known her, I'm starting to see some weird things on a lot in front of my house with my camera at night. On my lot in front of my house with my camera at night. My little dog is also seeing and reacting to things that I don't see with the naked eye. When he growls, if I take a photo in the dark, there are orbs, colored tubes, shapes that move. As far as the Dogman is concerned, it's a very real creature. This experience still disturbs me. I really want to know, but I am too scared to go back yet. At no time did it show any aggression. It could have arrived on us without a problem. It was moving fast with its long strides. I know that I will return to the forest despite my fear, but I will never go alone. My friend went back to her home in North France. When she was face to face with this creature, a small inner voice pushed her to go with it, but her survival instinct took over. My friend told me that she remembered a past life experience. She was hunted in the forest by humans. She had 2 wolves that accompanied her, a white one and a black one that protected her. When she was captured as a witch, the people killed the wolves in front of her cruelly. Ooh. Today's second encounter. Jeff, back in May of 2020, the quarantine in my state was in full swing. Being a senior in college, I took video classes and did digital homework. The change from in-person education to remote education was so drastic, however, I had accustomed pretty well to the new atmosphere of learning and had even developed some decent independent study habits. Nevertheless, I was growing stir-crazy in the dorm. My friend saved the day by telling me about this remote camping area that was roughly 45 minutes away. Fast forward a month of classes and prep, I was loading some heavy-duty camping gear into my truck, as I was expecting some treacherous terrain based off the description my friend had gave. Having previously told my instructors of my absence weeks in advance, I had no assignments to worry about for the next couple of days. I put the folded tent in the passenger seat, checked my pockets for the keys, wallet, and other essentials. Then, with much excitement, closed the driver's side door and started the truck. The drive was decently calm and beautiful. The trees were very deep and gorgeous shade of green. The sky was a blue, calming. I was ecstatic when I drove my truck into the cracked asphalt parking lot. I had arrived early. I thought I had wait. I went to the information kiosk and asked the lady there if I could get set up. She checked my reservation and gave me the all clear. Everything was going right. I got even better when I got to my camping spot and was able to set up my tent on the first try. I had found some pre-cut logs and threw them in the fire pit, just to be prepared for when night came. As I was going back to the fire pit to set up the last of the logs, I smelled something absolutely foul. It didn't take long to find this rotten, fly-covered carcass of a deer. I almost gagged at the smell as I looked at the body. With nose covered, I went back to my truck and called the kiosk, telling them about the deer. A couple minutes later, a ranger came over on an ATV and hauled the carcass onto the bed. He came over and told me, I think there may be a wolf or coyote around because the body had some pretty nasty slashes. Be careful on your stay, sir. And with that command, the ranger got onto his ATV and drove away to dispose of the deer. I was a little uneasy at the thought of a predator in the forest, but wasn't too worried, as coyote and wolves usually stay clear of humans. Later, I went back to the main building and showed my fishing license to a person at the desk. After verifying my license, he gave me the okay, and I went back to my truck, grabbed my lightweight canoe, grabbed my fishing rod, and went to the nearby river to catch dinner. My first catch was a small bass, which I threw back in. It was far too small. I got lucky with the second, which was a monster of a bass that would likely hold me over for the next couple of days. The day just couldn't get any better, save for that short run-in with the deer carcass, but I had mostly forgotten about the occurrence already. Night came pretty quick as I prepared the bass and roasted it over the fire. The bass was delicious, and there was some left over, so I put it in a special bag that retained heat and headed to my tent to read and go to bed. As I was reading, I stopped periodically to appreciate how everything was going my way. After a while, I grew tired, found a decent chapter to stop on, and climbed into the sleeping bag contently. I woke to the sound of these crunching sounds of the bag holding my cooked bass. Thinking it was a predator, I made some loud grunting noises to try and scare away the animal without having to confront it. After I stopped making noises, there were no noises outside, not even crickets chirping, which was odd. Then I heard a terrible scream. It was so loud and so close, just so wrong. It didn't sound like anything I had ever heard before or since. It was primal and terrifying. My fight and flight instinct kicked in at the worst moment possible, and I feverishly began rummaging through my various gear to find my hunting knife, which I had used to cut the bass. After what seemed like hours of panic-filled searching, I found the knife and went outside to put the animal that made this noise out of its misery. I rapidly unzipped my flap of the tent, quickly grabbed my flashlight, and was by the flap and stepped outside. And what I saw will forever haunt me as long as I live. What stood before me was this creature, wolf-like creature, eating the bass in the bag I had cooked. The creature's movements were so unnatural as it turned and faced me. It began walking towards me on all fours. Then it stood up. With this popping, snapping sound, it rose over 8 feet tall at least. On 2 legs, it closed the distance, starting to run. That's when my brain finally started to work, and I ran as fast as I could away from this thing. using techniques my cross-country buddies taught me. I steadied my breathing as I continued running. I ran for what felt like forever before I realized I was still holding my hunting knife. However, when I stopped to put it back into my pocket so I didn't cut myself, the creature screeched in front of me. I thought, there's no way this thing got in front of me without me noticing, yet I saw its seemingly glowing yellowish eyes peering at me from behind a tree. I realized that I could run back to my camp or, if I had enough energy, the main building of the campground. Then, without desperation that can only be described as primal, I ran. I believe the creature realized what I was doing because it roared in what I assumed to be rage behind me as I was sprinting. I could hear its footsteps as it was gaining on me, and I tried to run harder. I burst into the clearing where my tent was and ran by it, attempting to make it to the main building. I reached the parking lot, and then the footsteps behind me stopped. At the area of the woods from which I had come, I could see the two yellow eyes looking at me from the thicket. The creature didn't pass the wood line. I blessed the person who invented streetlights by the wood line before promptly vomiting into the nearby patch of grass from overexertion. When I looked up between heaves, the eyes were still watching me. Finally, I was able to calm myself down enough to briskly walk to the main building. Upon being asked what the heck I was doing in the building by the ranger there, I told him that a coyote tore into my food and then chased me to the parking lot before retreating back to my campsite to finish its meal. The ranger and I went to the campsite. It was completely destroyed. The cooked bass and bag was gone. My tent had been completely torn apart, and all my gear was just strewn about. Yeah, the ranger said, definitely looks like a coyote did this. We promptly looked around for anything salvageable and found nothing fixable. He called another ranger to bring a trash can to throw everything in. I slept like a rock in the ranger's station that night. The tiredness of running got to me. In the morning, I took a much-needed shower, gladly accepted a refund from the registration building, and headed back to my dorm. Life returned mostly to normal, but I will never forget for as long as I live that monster from those woods. This next encounter I shared in the live stream, and I really liked it because it really fit into all of the crazy and terrifying experiences that were shared that Saturday night. Once, when my family and I were living with my aunt and her family in McMinn County, Tennessee, my brother and older cousin swear they saw a Mothman. My aunt, uncle, and mom were going to the store. It was around 8 one night, and I, not wanting to be stuck in the house with my older brother, male cousin, and their 2 male friends, went with the adults. We had been gone at most a couple of hours when we pulled into the driveway, and all 4 boys sprinted out of the house terrified. 2 of them had shotguns, and immediately our parents demanded to know what happened. The group of boys from the ages of 10 to 14 were in tears, all trying to explain at once. Eventually, we got them to calm down enough to understand what they were saying. For reference, my aunt and uncle's home is in a very rural area of the Appalachian Mountains. They have a bit of woods and a creek. You can see from the back porch there's a fire pit halfway between the porch and the creek. Anyway, the boys said they opened the sliding back door and sat with their feet hanging off because they wanted to feel the breeze. Then my brother noticed a set of red glowing eyes in the dark. All of them, being young hunters, weren't frightened at first, thinking it may be an animal, but when they looked harder, they knew that it was not. It was shaped like a large man. It had casually leaned itself against a tree standing next to it and waved. The boys started freaking out, and right before 2 of them went to get their shotguns, it jumped, revealing large wings that spanned the width of its arms and flew mere feet above the ground. to stand by the fire pit. My brother said he did not move, and he and this creature locked eyes. He felt paralyzed. By the time our cousin and friend came back with shotguns, it was gone. My brother said that it was there, and in a blink of an eye, it wasn't. They took this as a good sign and closed the back door and huddled in the living room until we got back. Now, mind you, these boys don't scare too easy. Most of them had been hunting all their lives. They've shot deer, bear, wild boar, pretty much any animal they could. These boys were mortified. I'm not sure if any of them even slept that night. They weren't all right for a few weeks afterward. It's been almost 10 years since this happened, and to this day, both my brother and our cousin will not even joke about it. They get nervous any time that it's brought up and demand that we please stop talking about it. Today's fourth encounter. This experience happened the summer of 2019 while hiking in Lost Creek Wilderness vicinity of Pike National Forest, Colorado. A friend and I decided to get out of the city for a day hike. It was late afternoon by the time we reached the parking area. We expected to hike the last 2 hours round trip, which was mostly uphill. About 20 minutes in, we noticed some trees that were bent at odd angles. I pointed them out to my friend and made a joke about Bigfoot. By the time we neared the top of the trail, my friend, who was not in the best shape, started feeling winded. We decided to take a water break before reaching the end. The birds were chirping and everything seemed normal. The wind was pretty calm. After 10 or so minutes, I'm getting impatient, but she hadn't recovered yet. She told me to go ahead and finish the hike without her and promised to wait in the exact spot on the trail until I came back down. It was the uphill part that was getting her, and she assured me that she'd be fine walking down the mountain. According to my GPS, the end of the trail was close, maybe 5-10 minutes. I told her I'd take a quick walk to the overlook, snap a few shots of the scenery, and hurry back to meet her and head back down the mountain. It was 5 minutes later, hiking alone. I was nearing the overlook. Off to the side of the trail, I noticed some cool rock outcroppings and stopped to take a couple of photos. Then I noticed how quiet the woods got. I began to feel like I was being watched. The rock outcroppings, I thought, were so cool a minute ago, are now a potential hiding place for a predator. I quickly took my photos and chickened out on finishing the short hike to the overlook. I turned and started hiking back down the trail to where my friend was. The silence was following me, and I kept looking around for the source of this unease and saw nothing unusual. A couple of minutes later, I heard my friend in the distance shouting my name. I hurried to meet her. As I approached, I could tell something was wrong. Her face was pale, her voice was shaking. When she explained that the woods went quiet a few minutes after I left, then she began seeing movement in the trees a little ways off the trail. And there was also this strange clicking noise where the trees were swaying, a loud noise similar to someone clicking their tongue. She said the movement was at the height, taller than a regular person, and obviously made by something heavy, but she couldn't see anything out there. Whatever it was, there was no sign of anything strange now, but the woods were still eerily quiet, and that feeling of being watched was present. We booked it down that trail to my car, ignoring the need to take any more breaks. When the parking lot was about 5 minutes away, the birds started singing again, and the normal forest noises returned. When my friend described the clicking sound, it reminded me of an experience I had heard of some clicking like predator cryptid. You know, the kind that cloak itself, like in the movie The Predator. I don't know. I hope that I never experience anything like this in the Colorado woods. Thanks for letting me share. All right, guys, so that was the experiences. Now I'm going to share with you the last case file, which is super, super crazy. And I think you guys will agree that it is just absolutely insane. So, case file number 34. From Anunnaki to Unexplained 3. Date, Wednesday the 2nd, December 1998. Subject, Mudo, missing car. Hi, here's a good one for you. This is a true experience. I might have told it before, but I felt I should again. Around 1988, I had to make several trips to Pittsburgh weekly for business reasons. The road I was traveling was Route 8. This road has 4 to 5 lanes from a town called Butler to Pittsburgh itself. One certain Sunday I was traveling this road by myself. It was early in the morning and I was quite tired. The road had many stop signals followed by brief areas with no turn-offs. On this certain morning, I pulled right up to a red light and was waiting for the light to change. As I did, I saw a black limo pull up directly beside me. As I looked over to the limo, I noticed that the back window started to come down. I then saw 2 figures in the back seat. I then noticed that the limo started to pull forward, although the light had not changed. Then I saw one of the figure come closer to the back window that was down. As he did, I noticed that his skin was very pale in color and had a green cast. He also was wearing a black hat, suit, and sunglasses. He then took off his glasses, and I saw the most strangest eyes I had ever seen. They looked like reptilian. He then motioned for me to follow him. I was totally freaked out. I didn't know what to do. I then turned my head toward traffic light, hoping that it would change, and sure enough it did. And I made a beeline to go as fast as I could to get away from the limo. As I was heading forward, I looked in the rearview mirror and I saw the limo coming up closer and closer towards me. I then started to go so fast I was afraid. I then looked in the rearview mirror again to see if the limo was still following me, and to my surprise, the limo had disappeared. There were no turn-offs in between the light that I had stopped at and the next one, so there couldn't have been any place for that limo to pull over to. To this day, I do not know where that limo went, but, I do still remember those eyes. My name is Starfire from Nauru 12 TT Rogers. From Nikki Malloy. Date Saturday, November 4th, 2000, 3:31 p.m. Subject, Reptilian Encounters in Utah. Time to Kick Ass. By B. Alan Walden. Utah is literally surrounded by underground bases where reptilian humanoids reportedly have been seen. I will assume that the reader is already familiar with the reptilian mystery as described on such websites as davidicke.com. On such sites, one will learn about these bases. In this case, those surrounding the state of Utah on all sides, Burley, Idaho to the north, Mount Teton on the northeast, Denver International Airport to the east, Dulce, New Mexico to the southeast, Superstitions Mountain near Phoenix, Arizona to the south, Vegas, Mercury, Groom Lake, Nevada to the west. There has been a great deal of written on reptilians, especially on David Icke's Reptilian Archive site, and these cases are certainly not limited to areas mentioned above. This report will deal mainly with the reptilian activity in Utah, or rather, the many stories that I have heard. Whether these accounts are based on fact or fancy, I will let the readers decide. I was born and lived the early years of my life in southeast corner of Salt Lake Valley. Although I have no conscious memory, I do have what might be called intuitive memories in the form of dreams and so on of believing or being involved in some sort of government alien interaction scenario since a child. The gist of the scenario involves underground colonies of humans who, after entering into territorial treaties with subterranean species of reptilian humanoids over a period of time, became increasingly assimilated into the psychic collective, which controls the reptiles. These humans are known as the Melchizedeks, who apparently have ties with the inner cores of Masonry, Mormonism, and Nagamayas of Mount Shasta, the Agharti Ashtar collective, and native tribes living in a large system of caves. There are even rumors of a lost Israelite tribe of the Manasseh resides in this underground realm. My first introduction to the reptilian mystery came through my correspondence with Tali Vesk. Sometime later, I began hearing rumors of related activity in Utah. I remember the day when I received a phone call from my friend Kay Studstrup of Southeast Salt Lake City, telling me about what she learned from a friend of hers, Arvreen Davis of West Valley City, Utah. I called and later visited Miss Davis in her home and learned the whole experience. I was not surprised to learn that her entire neighborhood has been plagued for years by abduction-type phenomena. One of her neighbors spoke of being abducted to an underground city where she met strange humans and brown-skinned reptiles, but this was not the story which led me to her. The experience involved a young man named Peter, the son-in-law of Mrs. Davis, who had just been hired on as a security guard at the Crossroads Mall in downtown Salt Lake. Peter had learned that construction workers digging out the lower levels of the mall where Crossroads Cinema now lie had broken into some underground tunnels but never returned. He was told, when asked a fellow security guard about his desire to explore the tunnels, he was told that this might not be wise since he may encounter the lizard men, exact words, and not be allowed to return. This other security guard was dead serious. Another Salt Laker, John Todd, recalls the day many years ago when he walked into Crossroads Plaza, only to find a construction area in the lowest level where there was a pit tunnel corned off by construction tape. Ever curious, Mr. Todd walked upstairs the barrier and looked down the hole. Suddenly, a construction worker appeared and angrily told him to leave. Mr. Todd responded in a friendly fashion and got the man to admit that the tunnel had been penetrated 5 days earlier. One of the workers went down to explore, but in 5 days since has not returned. John Todd had also worked at the Dogman military base to the west, where he said he met a man at the tire shop who swore he had seen people transform into reptilian humanoids in the town of Dogway. Kay Studstrip had introduced me to Dan, a young man whose life was going well until he was abducted in City Creek Canyon, east of Salt Lake City, by a UFO. He did not remember what took place following his initial encounter. He awoke on the ground in the dead of night, but he did have nightmares of tall, green-skinned reptilian aliens with dark eyes staring down at him as if he were on some sort of operating table. Dan became very suicidal afterward. Kay Studstrip claims to be part of the hybrid program. As a teen, she had a photographic memory until the abductions began, following which she had experienced nothing but memory problems. Also, as if the aliens were intentionally disarming those who might become a threat to them, the evidence suggests that they also use the Montaukkian temporal manipulation to control us, having created numerous temporal, even singularities, which act as parasitic artificial reality fields, which feeds off of our own prime universe nexus. Anyway, Kay showed me the skin on her lower legs, which appeared very scaly, not the result of drying, but definitely defined pink scales. So maybe she is part of the alien genetic program. Her dad worked with the Manhattan Project, which, according to some, has also been involved with reptilian gray bases under Los Alamos, New Mexico. Kay's grandson, Matthew, is also an abductee. Kay recalls meeting a man who claimed to be from Dracos. Matt also met this individual and complained afterward that he somewhat gained access to his mind and would not leave. Irene Davis of West Valley City, west of Salt Lake, also recalls childhood experiences with reptilian-like aliens. On one occasion, she was horrified to see what she could only describe as an alien that looked like the creature from the Black Lagoon, peering through her window while living in Nevada. Sometime later, Mrs. Davis, her son Robert, were hired on as security guard night shift with the help of his brother-in-law Peter. Soon, Robert realized that there was something strange going on. He was familiar with the claims of alien activity in Area 51, for this was shortly after 1987, when the alien interaction scenario was simultaneously exposed by such figures as Bob Lazar, John Lear, Bill Cooper, Bill Hamilton, Agent Yellowfruit, George Knapp, Billy Goodman, and the late Stacy Borland, and others. Robert stated that the same power cult was operating in Nevada, Groom Lake, seemed to be active in Salt Lake City, which according to the late Dulce security officer Tom Castiel contains an underground base connecting Area 51 to Dulce and Los Alamos. One night, Robert and Peter, following a routine investigation resulting from a bomb threat, entered an off-limits passage in Crossroads Cinema area of the mall. Peter had earlier mentioned the water department manhole cover in this, the lowest section of the mall, as being an entrance to the tunnels, but I have reason to believe that there are no other access points as well. In this case, a locked stairwell behind the right-handed theater entered through two exit doors on either side of the screen. Behind this theater, there is a locked door without a label and some steps leading up into a long hallway that connects with other theaters before it emerges into an underground parking lot or into the main mall. Apparently, Robert and Peter used the bomb threat as an excuse to enter the sub-basement that they would normally have no access to. They descended 3 levels below the lowest part of the mall, emerging into a long hallway leading north. At the far end of the hall were 2 ancient-looking wooden doors, where a sub-basement of the Mormon temple would be. I heard from elsewhere that there may be as many as 8 levels beneath the Mormon temple, and over 30 miles of tunnels supposedly built by the early leaders of the church. When the Scottish Rite Mason Brigham Young first entered Salt Lake Valley, he ordered the excavation of a large hole that would later become a sub-basement to the Mormon temple. Then a rumor surfaced that the United States Army Battalion was heading their way. So Brigham Young ordered the excavation to be filled in until the military had passed through. What was he trying to hide? There are rumors that the Rothschilds in their Masonic Lodge helped finance the Mormon Church, just as they financed the Jehovah's Witness, Unitarian, and other neo-Masonic churches, but this cannot be entirely confirmed. It is, however, written about in Rothschild's cult network and the Reptilian connection. Back to Robert Davis and Pete. They also noticed in the underground hall a door separate from the northern wooden doors, behind which they saw a greenish luminescence. For some reason, the thought of opening that door frightened them, so they did not. Brent Butler of Colorado also claimed that he and a friend had seen this underground hall 3 levels down. Todd Jumper mentioned something that they caught my attention a few years back while traveling interstate on a bus. He had struck up a conversation with a man who out of the blue told him a strange story. He had personal knowledge of the construction worker who was among those who broke into the underground tunnels during the excavation of the Crossroads Cinema. This worker swore that after entering the tunnels, he was attacked by a lizard/serpent man. He escaped with his life, and soon the story was making its rounds. Apparently, the feds even got involved. I doubt they called Agent Mulder, though. I've heard variations of this experience from elsewhere. Some variations mention a temple worker, but the above is the most tangible one I have heard to date. But of course, Robert Davis is a prime source. According to his mother, Arvine, following a friend of his returned one night to investigate the manhole cover that he had heard about. Whether it was in the alley adjacent to the crossroads or within the loading dock, I am not certain. After having pulled out the manhole cover with trucks and a chain, two entered an underground passage that intersected with the city's underground drainage system. They passed an intersection where they had to navigate over a stream of water and continued until they finally emerged into a cement chamber about 10 feet square. In that floor was a metallic trapdoor, which could only be opened from above. They did so, being careful to leave the trapdoor open. Below was an identical cement cubicle with yet another trapdoor, and below a similar one. This third room had a long tunnel leading north to a door. Carefully opening the door, just a crack, they peered through into a large underground chamber about 300 feet long, in which they saw two men in suits carrying Uzi machine guns pacing back and forth. Needless to say, they beat a hastily retreat back to the third cubicle, but their curiosity getting the better of them, they continued downward to the fourth and then the fifth cubicle. The fifth had a tunnel leading south into a large cavern. The most notable sight was a large south tunnel strung with lights and large enough to drive a semi-truck through. I wonder if this connects to the underground tunnels that are said to lie beneath the Trolley Square and Sugar House malls, or perhaps with massive caverns that lie underneath the north face of Little Cottonwood Canyon and the southeast. Many sources have referred to the Granite Mountain base, a Little Cottonwood Canyon consisting of a huge underground vault maintained by the Mormon Church, connected by the underground passage to even larger military bases. To the northeast, where witnesses have reported massive underground construction projects, huge caverns, and underground buildings in which CIA agents have been seen working with reptilian greys on electrical equipment, and so on. Robert Davis also mentioned that in this cavern he and a friend entered. There were also apparently a bottomless shaft, since they heard no sound when the stones were thrown down. Also, there was a manhole cover with the initials less than Z. So, like that, the V this way and Z carved into it. Robert suspected that this might be the tunnel that leads to the Hogle Zoo to the east. The strangest sight, however, were human-sized footprints in the dust of the chamber, but these prints had only 3 toes. The 2 of them returned to the surface, and it was only a few days later that Robert heard an unusual story. It seemed that a Hispanic woman who did night cleaning at the mall quit. She claimed that while working, a creature that she could only describe as a demon wobbled up to her, snarled in her face, and then continued past her down the hall. Robert, realizing that he and his friend did not close the trapdoors when they left the cubicle shaft, was afraid that he essentially had been responsible for the incident and inadvertently opened up the door to Hades. There's another admitted rumor of a large Masonic temple tunnel leading under Vegas to Salt Lake City. Also, Katie Studstrip claimed to have seen reptilian shapeshifters in a Nordstrom building in downtown Salt Lake. In somewhat of an Ikean vein, she described the imposters as tall, lanky, blonde, with a modern bowl cut hairstyle. What tipped her off was the conversation she had heard between the two of them. Also, neither of them had any blemishes whatsoever. Many mornings I am awake to faint sounds of screams and cries, as if from men, women, and children crying out from dungeons underground. With faint memories of horrible nightmares of alien prison camps deep within underground where atrocities beyond human comprehension are being carried out. Given the chance, supposing that there is large enough militia force to carry it out, I would gladly take part in Operation Dungeon Storm type of invasion to the underworld. Flamethrower in one hand, 9mm semi-automatic in the other, as we commence to kick ass and take names. But don't ask me to do it alone. Maybe one day the conditions will be ripe for such a response to the reptilian threat. But unfortunately, most people seem to be more interested in talk than action. I can't help but feel I might have to take a very rude awakening to motivate the masses to respond to the reptilian threat. Above, within, the below. Until then, I suppose the cries and screams of the lost will continue. So that was the last of the reptilian case files, 34 of them to be exact. That is a stack, my friends, which I have them in their own folder. I will be narrating them hopefully in one video. Maybe I'll do part 1, part 2. It's going to be probably a 2-hour long video, so I don't know if people will watch it. Honestly, I probably am just going to record it, and if people don't watch it, then they don't watch it. At least it's recorded and out there. I think this information needs to be shared. These reptilian bases, these underground bases run by the reptilian draconian empire, and whoever you want to call this mysterious one world government. The Rothschilds were mentioned. The 13 bloodlines of the Illuminati are my guess of who the one world government would be. I doubt very seriously that it is any kind of decrepit old man running any of these countries that we hear about in the news nowadays, whether it be the States, Russia, North Korea, Iran, Israel. I doubt any of them have any kind of amount of power that these 13 families have. They are running these bases such as Dulce. There's a base under Mount Shasta. 6 or 7 bases just in Virginia alone, created by man, but the majority of them created by these draconians to do their horrendous atrocities against humans, like it said in that. Anytime I hear of a missing person, unlike a 411, but who's to say? Here's something interesting. Who's to say that Tom Mezek wasn't taken by some sort of reptilian creature? That would explain that metallic sound a little better than it just being unexplained. That sound freaked me out when I caught that up there. Just terrified me. I've got a video of like 23 minutes of all the strange things that I caught up there. And I do believe that there are large underground military bases with tunnels that just course through the Adirondacks. Smaller ones, some small, run by our military, not by the one world one world government, but the United States military, working for a better American way of life. But, they're actually working for the 13 bloodline and the draconian green bloodline. Just some strange information in that 34 case files. With that, I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is your support, after all, that keeps this channel growing and going, and honestly what gives people a chance and a place to share their experiences, theories, and ideas judgment-free. Just simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Thank you. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. Share this information with the people you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. This, not just the creatures, but the scenarios, this information about these deep underground military bases, it's all true. There are countless books written about it. Countless men and women have talked about it. Tom Horn, the great late Tom Horn, Dr. Mose, Navajo doctor, talks about the sacred twins, which I've shared that experience or that story, the giant killers. That's what they were called, the giant killers. Anyway, sorry we got off base off that outro, but guys, never stop looking for answers and never stop looking for the truth. God bless.